Jonas had always been a mechanic, but never in his wildest dreams did he imagine he'd find himself on a strange, distant world. The ship malfunction had been sudden, unexpected. One minute, he was on a routine flight to a mining colony. The next, he was spiraling out of control into the atmosphere of Arindor, a planet he had never heard of. He crash-landed in a desert, the wreckage of his ship scattered across the sand. The heat was intense, and the wind howled around him as he stumbled from the wreckage, the remnants of his ship smoking in the distance. His comms were down, and he had no way to contact anyone. There was no way to get back home. Jonas wasn't the kind of man to panic, though. He was a problem solver, a mechanic. His hands could fix almost anything, so long as he had the right tools. But here, on this foreign planet, he had neither tools nor a clue where to begin. He couldn't even get the ship's engines to fire back up. His survival instincts kicked in, though, and he set off in search of help. After hours of wandering in the unforgiving desert heat, Jonas stumbled upon the outskirts of a city. More of a large settlement, really. The buildings were tall, made of materials he couldn't identify, their surfaces shimmering in the sun like metal but smooth as glass. The architecture was alien, nothing like he'd ever seen before. Jonas made his way into the city, moving cautiously. He didn't know what to expect. The people here, too, were unlike any humans he had ever met. They were tall, with skin in colors he didn't recognize. Some were shades of blue and purple, others had metallic tones that shifted depending on the light. They had sharp, angular features and eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. Despite their striking appearance, these beings moved about the city as if nothing were out of the ordinary. They spoke in a language Jonas couldn't understand, and their mannerisms were alien. But their eyes, there was a sharpness in them that made Jonas feel as though he were being studied closely. He wandered for a while, trying to gather information, but everyone seemed too busy with their own lives to pay him much attention. He felt lost, hungry, a little desperate. It wasn't until he reached the central square that he saw her. She stood at the center, surrounded by a group of well-dressed individuals, her presence commanding. Her long hair shimmered like molten silver, cascading down her back in waves. Her skin, a rich shade of violet, seemed to glow faintly, and her eyes, her eyes, were the color of starlight, brilliant and captivating. She wore a gown unlike anything Jonas had ever seen. Intricate patterns seemed to dance across the fabric, woven with glowing threads that shifted in the sunlight. This was no ordinary woman. Jonas stopped in his tracks, transfixed by her presence. He didn't know what drew him to her, whether it was her beauty or the way she carried herself, but he knew she was important. He felt it in his gut. She turned toward him as if sensing his gaze, her eyes locking onto his. There was no fear in her expression, only curiosity.
"Human,"
she said, her voice both soft and firm, yet commanding. Her accent was foreign, but her words were clear. "You are." Jonas opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He wasn't sure what to say. He hadn't expected someone like her to even acknowledge him. Yes, he stammered. I crash-landed here. My ship is broken. I don't know where I am. She nodded slowly, as though considering his words carefully.
"You are on Arindor, a planet of the Arindorian people. You have come at an inconvenient time, human."
Jonas furrowed his brow, still trying to comprehend what she was saying. I don't mean to cause any trouble. I just need help. I need to fix my ship. The woman studied him, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. Then, without another word, she stepped forward, her movements graceful and fluid. A group of attendants followed behind her, all watching Jonas with interest. I can offer you shelter, she said. And food. I can provide you with what you need to repair your ship. Jonas blinked, surprised. You'd help me? Her lips curled into a small, enigmatic smile. I am a princess, she said. I have resources. I can spare them for you. Jonas wasn't sure what to make of this.
A princess? She was royalty?
It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. What does? What does that turn?
Thank you.
He said, but I don't understand. Why would you help me? She looked at him then, a glint of amusement in her eyes. It is not only a matter of helping you, she said. I have a proposal, human. Jonas was about to ask what she meant when she held up her hand, silencing him. She reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out 3 small, glimmering coins. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, shiny and metallic, but with a strange iridescence. The coins seemed to shift colors as they caught the light. She held them out to him, her eyes fixed on his. You meant, she said, her voice softening just a little.
Would these 3 coins be enough to purchase a husband?
Jonas blinked, sure that he had misunderstood her. A husband? What was she talking about? Wait, he said, shaking his head. I think I... She cut him off, her tone still gentle but firm. It is a simple question. Would these 3 coins be enough to purchase a husband? Jonas stood there, frozen. This woman, this alien princess, was asking him to become her husband. It was absurd. Ridiculous. And yet, her expression was dead serious. I don't understand, Jonas said, his voice barely above a whisper. The princess smiled, as if she had expected this reaction. You are a man of Earth, yes, and yet you do not know the value of these coins. Jonas's mind raced. He wasn't sure what to say or how to respond to her. He'd never encountered anything like this before, and now he was standing in front of a princess, an alien princess no less, who was offering him something he couldn't even comprehend. He had no idea how his life had turned upside down so quickly, but one thing was certain. Jonas was about to embark on a journey that would change everything, and this strange, alien princess was at the center of it all. Jonas stood there, staring at the 3 shimmering coins in the princess's hand. His mind raced, trying to process the situation. The heat of the desert, the crash, the alien city, everything seemed like a bad dream. But this was real. He was stuck on a strange planet, and now an alien princess was asking if these 3 coins could purchase him as a husband. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He wasn't sure if he should laugh, or if this was some kind of joke. The princess stood before him, serene and composed, waiting for a response. He didn't know what to do, so he just stared at her. Finally, the princess spoke again, her voice calm and measured. You are confused, human. I ask. But you are here, and you will hear me out. Jonas blinked, unsure of how to respond. He couldn't tell if she was serious or if there was some kind of misunderstanding. The coins glinted in the sunlight, their strange metallic sheen almost hypnotic. He had no idea what they were made of, but there was no mistaking the authority in her eyes. I don't know what you mean, Jonas said, his voice sounding unsure even to himself. Why would you need a human husband? And why me? The princess's gaze softened, and she took a step closer to him. You do not understand the ways of our... She said, her tone almost gentle now. But perhaps it is better that way. Jonas felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. He wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but it was clear that the princess wasn't going to let him go until he understood something. He was caught in her web, whether he liked it or not. She motioned for him to follow her, and without thinking, he did. The crowd around them parted as the princess walked with a regal grace, her attendants trailing behind her. They passed through the busy market square, where strange and exotic goods were being exchanged. Jonas could see merchants selling everything from glowing fruits to weapons that seemed to hum with energy. The city felt alive in a way he hadn't experienced before, the air thick with a mix of scents and sounds he couldn't identify. As they walked, the princess spoke again, her voice low and steady. "Our planet, Erendor, is old, older than your Earth. We have seen many cycles of rulers and kingdoms, but we have never seen a time like this. The old ways must change, or our world will collapse." Jonas couldn't help but listen, even though he had no idea what she was talking about. He was just a mechanic. He had no place in this political drama. All he wanted was to fix his ship and get back to Earth. Yet, here he was, being dragged into something far bigger than he ever imagined. The princess continued, her words laced with the weight of centuries of tradition. "Our people have always chosen their rulers through bloodlines. But my bloodline is in danger. My father, the king, is old and ill. There are others who seek to take the throne. They would see the kingdom fall into chaos. And I have no choice but to marry a foreigner." Jonas frowned, still struggling to grasp the full extent of what she was saying. "But why me?" he asked again, his voice rising slightly. "I'm just a mechanic. I'm not even from this planet." The princess stopped walking and turned to face him. Her eyes, once cool and distant, now seemed to hold the depth of understanding. "Because you are human," she said softly.
Your kind is not bound by our traditions. You do not carry the weight of centuries of rule on your shoulders.
"You do not seek power. You are free." "And that is what I need." Jonas was still processing her words when they arrived at a large, ornate building. It was a palace of some kind, though unlike any palace he had ever seen. The walls were made of smooth, pale stone, and the windows were enormous, offering views of the sprawling city below. There were no guards at the entrance, but the atmosphere felt charged, like the building itself was alive with the pulse of something powerful. The princess led Jonas inside, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of her words. What did she mean, "your kind is free"? Did she think that being human made him some kind of ideal candidate for her marriage? He was no diplomat. He had no royal blood. He was just a man from Earth trying to survive. Inside the palace, the air was cool and smelled faintly of flowers. They walked through long, winding corridors lined with tapestries and sculptures of unknown creatures. The walls seemed to hum with an energy that Jonas couldn't explain. The deeper they went into the palace, the more he felt like he was stepping into a world that was not his own. Finally, they reached a large room, its walls adorned with strange symbols and glowing stones. At the center of the room was a throne made of shimmering, translucent material. It seemed to shift and change colors as the light hit it, casting shadows that danced on the walls. The throne was empty, but Jonas could feel the weight of its significance. The princess took a seat on a smaller chair beside the throne and motioned for Jonas to sit as well. "I know this is difficult to understand," she said, her voice quiet now, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "But I must ask for your help. You are the only one who can help me save my people." Jonas took a deep breath, trying to keep his thoughts straight. "I'm not sure how I can help you," he said, his voice calm but unsure. "I'm not a politician." "I don't know anything about ruling a kingdom." "You do not need to rule," the princess replied. "You need only be by my side. Your presence will show the people that we are not bound by tradition. It will show them that we are willing to embrace change. That is what they need to see." Jonas sat in silence for a moment, contemplating her words. He had never asked for any of this. He didn't want to be some pawn in an alien kingdom's power struggle. He just wanted to fix his ship and go home. But the princess was right about one thing. He was free. He wasn't tied to Erendor or any of its politics. Maybe that was what made him valuable to her. In a world where everyone seemed trapped by their own rules,
Jonas was the only one who could offer something different.
He didn't know what he was going to do, but he couldn't just walk away. Not yet. He had to learn more. He had to understand why this was happening and how he could get out of it. Or maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to help her. Jonas sighed, knowing that his life had just become infinitely more complicated. And as he looked at the princess sitting across from him, he realized that there was no going back now. This was his life now, at least for the time being. Jonas lay awake that night in the guest quarters of the palace, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling. He had been given a lavish room, one with walls that shimmered with strange light and a bed that felt softer than anything he had ever known. But despite the comfort, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was wrong. His mind was racing, thoughts tangled together like a knot he couldn't undo. He had come to this alien world by accident. A crash, a strange planet, an alien princess who wanted to make him her husband. It felt like something out of a dream or a nightmare, but there was no waking up from it. This was his reality now. What was he supposed to do? He couldn't just agree to become her husband, could he? He wasn't even sure if the offer was real. Maybe it was some kind of cultural misunderstanding. But the way she spoke, the weight in her words, made it clear that she was not joking. She needed him for something far beyond just companionship. As he lay there, trying to find some sense of peace, a soft knock at the door broke the silence. Jonas sat up quickly, heart pounding in his chest. Was it the princess again? Had she come to speak with him? Or was it someone else, with news of his ship? He swung his legs over the side of the bed and walked over to the door, still groggy but alert. He opened it just a crack, half expecting to see the princess herself standing there. Instead, it was a tall figure, dressed in the same royal attire as the princess. His skin was a dark blue, his features sharp and proud. He had a serious expression on his face, his eyes narrowing when he saw Jonas. "Come," the man said, his voice commanding yet calm. "The princess wishes to speak with you." Jonas nodded, though he had no idea why he was being summoned so late at night. Without saying a word, he followed the man down the winding corridors of the palace, their footsteps echoing in the quiet halls. They passed through several rooms, each grander than the last, until they reached the princess's private chambers. The door was open, and inside, Leora was waiting. She sat on a low chair near a large window, looking out at the city below. The light of the twin moons outside bathed her in a soft glow, making her seem almost ethereal, as if she belonged to another world entirely. When she heard them enter, she turned her gaze toward Jonas, her expression unreadable. She motioned for him to sit across from her, and Jonas obeyed, unsure of what to expect. "I did not mean to disturb your rest," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "But I need to speak with you about something important." Jonas shifted in his seat, still feeling the weight of her earlier proposal. He wasn't sure if he was ready for more talk about becoming her husband, but something in her eyes made him feel like this conversation was different. She wasn't just the royal princess anymore. She was someone who needed his help, someone who was trapped in a situation she couldn't control. "What is it?" Jonas asked, his voice quiet but steady. Leora hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I know that you are not from this world, Jonas. You do not know what it is like to rule here, to carry the weight of the crown. But I need you to understand that my position is not as simple as you may think." Jonas nodded, though he didn't fully understand what she meant. She was the princess. She had the power, didn't she? So why did she need him? Leora continued, her voice softening. "My people are not as they once were. Arendor is dying, and with it, the traditions that have held us together for so long. The royal bloodline, the old ways, they are no longer enough to keep us united. I need a partner who can help me bring about change. Someone who can break the cycle of our history." Jonas listened intently, sensing the urgency in her voice. She wasn't just asking for a marriage. She was asking for a partnership, for a chance to reshape her world, to bring hope to a planet that had lost its way. "I don't know what I can do to help you," Jonas said, his voice filled with doubt. "I'm just a mechanic. I fix things."
I'm not a leader. I don't know how to save a planet.
Leora leaned forward, her gaze never leaving his. "You are exactly what I need. You come from a world where anything is possible, a world where there is no rigid system of rule. On Earth, there is freedom. And that is what Arendor needs more than anything. We are bound by the past, by the traditions that have been forced upon us. But you are a symbol of what we could be. A new beginning." Jonas felt the weight of her words sink in. He had never seen himself as someone capable of leading or changing anything. He had always been content fixing things, keeping things running smoothly. But now, he was being asked to help guide an entire world through its darkest time. He wasn't sure if he was ready for something so big. "I don't understand," he said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "Why me? Why not someone from your own world?" Leora sighed, her gaze dropping to the floor for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was filled with a quiet sadness. "Because no one else will do. My people have been blinded by tradition for too long. They need someone who can see beyond that. They need someone who is not bound by their ways. And you are free. That is why I need you by my side." Jonas was quiet for a long moment, his thoughts swirling around him like a storm. He didn't know if he could be the person she wanted him to be. He didn't know if he could help save her world. But as he looked at her, really looked at her, he saw the fear in her eyes, the weight of responsibility she carried on her shoulders. She wasn't asking for a husband in the way he had first thought. She was asking for an ally, a partner in something far greater than either of them.
I don't know what I can do for you, Jonas said slowly, but I'll help.
I'll try. Leora's eyes softened, and a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "That is all I can ask for. We will face this together, Jonas." For the first time since he had crash-landed on this strange planet, Jonas felt a sense of purpose. Maybe he wasn't a ruler. Maybe he didn't have the answers. But for the first time, he realized that perhaps he had something more important, the willingness to fight for something better, to stand with the princess, to stand with her people, and to make a difference in a world that seemed to be on the brink of collapse. It wasn't going to be easy. He didn't know how things would turn out. But as he looked at Leora, he knew that whatever came next, he wouldn't be alone. Days passed, and the palace was filled with a quiet tension. Jonas found himself slowly adjusting to the new life he had found in Arendor. The alien city, with its strange lights and even stranger customs, became a familiar backdrop to his daily routine. But his mind never stopped turning. Every day brought more questions. And with every question, the reality of his situation weighed heavier on him. Leora had kept her word. She had given him everything he needed to repair his ship, and though it wasn't quite ready to fly yet, Jonas had made progress. The ship's systems were complex, unlike anything he had worked on back on Earth, but he could see the potential. He could fix it. He could leave. That was the plan. But the more time he spent with Leora, the harder it became to focus on leaving. She was a ruler, burdened by expectations, but she was also a woman with hopes, dreams, and fears. Fears she rarely shared. Jonas found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't expected. He had come to this planet with the sole intention of fixing his ship and going home, but somewhere along the way, he had become entangled in something much larger than he had ever imagined. He spent more time in the palace than he initially planned. Leora had requested his presence often, not for anything official, but for quiet moments when the pressures of leadership were too much to bear. She had begun to trust him in a way that went beyond their political arrangement, and that trust was not something Jonas took lightly. On one particular evening, after a long day of repairs, Jonas was summoned once again to her private chambers. He was starting to get used to the quiet, intimate dinners they shared, the conversations about her world, and the way she spoke about her people's future. It was clear that she was struggling, torn between tradition and the hope of something new. Jonas entered the room, surprised to see that it was lit only by the soft glow of lanterns. The air was cool, and there was a calmness in the room that he hadn't noticed before. Leora was seated by a large window, looking out at the sprawling city beneath them. The twin moons were high in the sky, casting pale light across the landscape. "Jonas," she said, her voice soft. "Come, sit with me." Jonas walked over to the small table by the window and took a seat across from her. He could feel the weight of the moment. Something had changed between them. She no longer spoke to him just as a political ally. She spoke to him as a person, someone who shared her burdens.
"I've been thinking,"
Leora said, breaking the silence.
"You've helped me more than you know, not just with the ship, but with my people."
"You've shown me that there is another way, that perhaps we can move beyond the old ways." Jonas wasn't sure how to respond. He had never been in a position like this before, to have his opinion valued by someone so important. He had come here out of necessity, but somewhere along the way, he had become part of her struggle, part of her journey.
I've seen what you're doing here, Jonas said, his voice low.
"You're trying to bring change to a world that's stuck in the past. I can't pretend to understand everything, but I see how hard you're working."
I see the weight on your shoulders. Leora met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow.
"It is not easy," she said softly, "but I have no choice. My people need to see that I am not like the rulers before me. They need to see that change is possible." Jonas leaned back in his chair, thinking. He had learned much about Arendor in the short time he had been there. The planet was rich in resources and history, but it was divided, its people torn between tradition and progress. The royal family had been the symbol of that division for centuries. Leora's reign had the potential to unite her people, but only if she could break free of the chains that held her and her kingdom to the past. "I know you want to do the right thing," Jonas said, his voice steady, "but you can't carry the weight of the world alone." Leora's expression softened, and she nodded slowly. "I know," she said quietly.
"But I have no choice. If I don't do this, if I don't make the hard decisions, who will?"
"My father is weak. The council is divided.
And the people need a leader who will not falter."
Jonas watched her, seeing the exhaustion in her eyes. She was strong, but the burden she carried was too much for one person. He could see it now, the fear behind the facade of power. She was afraid of failure, afraid of letting her people down. "You don't have to do it alone," Jonas said softly. "I don't know if I'm the right person to help you, but I'm here."
"I'll help however I can."
Leora smiled faintly, her gaze softening as she met his eyes. "You already have, Jonas. You've helped me in ways I never imagined. You've made me see that there is more than one way to rule, more than one way to live." The silence between them was comfortable, the weight of their shared understanding hanging in the air. For the first time since his arrival on Arendor, Jonas felt a sense of peace. He had come to this planet to fix a broken ship, to escape the complications of his own life. But in the process, he had found something far more important: purpose. And that purpose wasn't about fixing a ship. It was about fixing something deeper, something that could change the future of Arendor, and perhaps even his own. "I'll stand by you," Jonas said finally, his voice steady. "Whatever happens, I'll be there." Leora looked at him, her expression thoughtful. You are more than I ever expected, Jonas. I never imagined I would find someone like you here, on this world. He wasn't sure how to respond to that, but he didn't need to. The sincerity in her voice, in her eyes, was enough. For the first time since his arrival on Arendor, he felt like he belonged. The sound of the twin moons rising in the distance echoed softly through the room, filling the silence with a peaceful hum. Jonas and Leora sat together, the weight of the past behind them and the future uncertain. But for the first time, they both felt like they could face whatever came next, together.